Good day everyone and welcome back to class 2 of Hittite for complete beginners. If you're here, I will take it that you watched class number 1 and you didn't think it was terrible, and so you've come back for more, which is great news for me, to be quite frank, and we can continue this journey learning Hittite together. Now let's begin today with a little bit of a review. This is the sentence that we deconstructed in the last class. Atash hulanan ani pai. The father gives the wool to mother. As we spoke about in class 1, Hittite doesn't have any articles, so no a, no the, and whether we choose to include those in our English translation is really just down to context. Spoke in the first class about the importance of the endings of nouns in Hittite, because the endings of nouns indicate the function of a word, of a noun, grammatically in a sentence. Here in Atash we have the sh sound, which indicates that this is in the nominative case, so it's the subject of the sentence. Here we have the n ending, which indicates that it's in the accusative case, so it's the direct object. And here we have the I, which indicates that it's the dative case and it's the indirect object. And pi is, of course, our verb, which meant to give. Now, because you're all diligent people, I'm sure you have realized that we are representing our Hittite language using an extended form of the Latin alphabet. I just want to point out actually that the exact pronunciation of Hittite is debated amongst academics, because obviously there are no Hittite speakers that we can interact with to ask them for their advice on pronunciation. But for example, this sh sound may have been pronounced as a s. And this laryngeal here, well, there is quite a lot of debate about how exactly that was pronounced. But the state of the science in terms of Hittite is at the stage now where I think that if we could travel back in time, or if we could abduct somebody from the Hittite kingdom and bring them back to our world, that we would be able to communicate with each other more or less. Of course, we have to remember that even in, let's say, English language, for example, there is a vast array, a wide variety of accents and dialects, and we can all pretty much communicate and understand each other. But not Geordies. I don't understand what Geordies are saying. So yeah, we're using the Latin alphabet to represent our Hittite language. But of course, Hittites themselves didn't use the Latin alphabet. They used Canary Form. And if you're unsure what Canary Form is, don't worry, because I did a video about it on this channel, so you can go and check that out. I'll leave a card here for you to look at. And so Canary Form looks something like this symbol that I've just drawn on the screen. This symbol represents Dingir, and it's one of the first symbols that you learn in Hittite because it's actually used as a demonstrative to introduce the names of deities. But we don't have to worry about that today. This is basically just how Canary Form looked. Canary Form was a writing system that was used to impress wedge shapes into clay, and that's why it looks the specific way that it does. And in modern Hittite study, what usually happens is we transliterate the Canary Form into the Latin alphabet so it's easier to work with. To be honest, even nowadays, it's very difficult for me, as I'm not very technically gifted, to represent Hittite cuneiform, the exact form of cuneiform that the Hittites used, on a computer screen using Unicode characters and things like that. With Akkadian, it's possible, but with Hittite, it's a little bit more complicated. So for everybody, it's just easier if we work with the Latin alphabet. But fear not, because in the future, we will definitely pay some more attention to cuneiform. Now, the cuneiform writing system, the Hittites inherited or took over from the Akkadians, and before them the Akkadians took over cuneiform from the Sumerians. And because the Hittites inherited this writing system, they also inherited many of the customs that Akkadians and Sumerians had in their writing, including inheriting certain signs, which we call Sumerograms or Akkadograms. These signs usually represent singular concepts, an idea or a thing. And the reason that they're used in Hittite writing, even though they're Akkadian or Sumerian, is probably just because everybody knew what they meant and it was easier to use the Akkadian sign or the Sumerian sign. This is not completely unusual because, if you think in the modern world, I, for example, speak Polish as a second language, and we incorporate many English words in Polish, usually because it's just easier, faster, sounds better even. One example that springs to mind is food truck. We could express this idea using Polish words. It would be something like jedzonko wóź, but we don't. We use the English term. Maybe it's a bit faster to say, a bit easier to write. Everybody knows what it means anyway. It's the established term. Probably for similar reason, that's why Hittites used Sumerograms and Akkadograms in their writing. One key difference, however, is that they just used the sign. They would still pronounce the word however it would have been pronounced in Hittite. They would have just used the Akkadian or Sumerian sign to represent that idea. And you can differentiate Sumerograms from Akkadograms by the way that they're presented in the Latin alphabet. So Sumerograms always use the capitalized Latin alphabet, and they use dots to separate individual words. So on the left-hand side of the screen, we have our Sumerograms. On the right-hand side of the screen, it's also capitalized, but it's in italics, and dashes would be used to separate two different Akkadograms together in the same sentence. Let's translate them. So Lugal-gal means great king. Kash or Kas means beer. Sharu also means king. And Ul is the Akkadian word for not. The next thing that we need to consider with Sumerograms and Akkadograms is that we still need to use our important Hittite grammar, our case endings to these nouns. That means that if we take the Sumerian word en, which meant lord or master, when we're using it in a sentence, really we need to indicate our Hittite grammar alongside it. So, for example, en would become enash in the nominative form with this sh ending that we're familiar with from class 1. The accusative would be, sorry, that should be capitalized. The accusative would be an with this n ending, which again we're familiar with, and the dative would be ne. Now, the reason that we have this extra vowel here is probably because Hittite doesn't tolerate two consonants being clustered together particularly well. And so to avoid this clustering, very often when we're declining a noun in the nominative or the accusative or whatever form, if we would have this consonant cluster, we're required to insert a vowel. In this case, it's the a. So in the nominative, n-ash, in the accusative, n-an, and in the dative, ne. But these endings, I'm sure you're familiar with from class 1. So yeah, that's the sum of it really. Sumerograms, Akkadograms, very common in Hittite writing. Some of them are really, really common, and we'll pick them up very quickly when we get into looking at some real texts. But let's finish today with a little bit of homework maybe, because everybody likes homework, right? Makes you feel like you're back at school. So here we've got a Sumerian word, lugal. Again, we recognize it's Sumerian because it's in capitals, but it's not in italics. And lugal means king. And your homework is to decline the word king in the three different cases that we've had a look at: nominative, accusative, and dative. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a clue. You're going to have to add, for the nominative and the accusative, a vowel, which we spoke about. We need to add that vowel to avoid the consonant cluster. And that's it. You have a go. Write your answers in the comment section below. How would we decline lugal, the Sumerogram, in nominative, accusative, and dative forms in Hittite language? That's it from me for the class today. Stay tuned. Class 3 is going to be on its way very shortly. We'll be looking again at some more complex case forms in Hittite, and hopefully we will get round to introducing some adjective forms. It's been a pleasure to spend some time with you today. I hope this was useful for you, and I'll see you next time.